December is a season of many holidays. For Unitarian Universalists with our pluralistic communities and our interfaith families, it may feel like everything is happening at once. I love the way that we weave so many traditions together. And I think it's also important to give each tradition its moment, understanding its own messages and stories. This year, Hanukkah starts at sunset on December 25th. Hanukkah is a meaningful celebration for my family and for several of the members here. And I think there are a few lessons of Hanukkah that are helpful for all of us. As I'm sure you know, lighting the Chanukiah, the menorah that is specific to Hanukkah, is one of the central practices of the holiday. Together, we kindle the lights of memory and hope. Together, we gather people into this journey of perseverance and surprise. Together, we celebrate the songs and the poems that draw us closer to freedom. Hanukkah is a festival of lights. This is not to disrespect the darkness. The darkness brings us mystery. The darkness may have sheltered the Maccabees and given them an advantage in the surprise maneuvers. Sheltering, nurturing darkness has its time for seeds and for souls and for the new moon. So too comes the time to kindle new flames and to illuminate a new way forward. Once the Maccabees drove out the Seleucid Greeks, they established a government of self-rule known as the Hasmonean dynasty. This chapter in history lasted a generation before more destabilizing events occurred. Political stability is not the point of Hanukkah. Nothing temporal lasts forever. Rededication and celebrating heritage are the themes. Every year, we renew our commitment to freedom, to love, and to observing sacred time and space, passing along these traditions like the flame of a candle. Love is one of the things that helps us to create sacred time and space. Theologians and philosophers of many traditions agree, recognizing that this congregation includes theists and non-theists and people with a variety of beliefs. I'm going to quote a theist for a minute. In To Heal a Fractured World, The Ethics of Responsibility, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks writes that the Hebrew Bible repeatedly emphasizes that we cannot see God face to face. It follows that we can only see God in the face of another. Rabbi Sacks goes on to point out an interesting detail in the description of the Ark of the Covenant in the ancient temple. Above the ark were two figures, cherubim, and the Torah says that their faces were turned toward one another. It was between the two cherubs that God spoke to Moses. The message of this symbol was so significant that it was deemed by God themselves to be sufficient to outweigh the risk of misunderstanding. God speaks when two persons turn their face to one another in love, embrace, generosity, and care. God's presence is everywhere, but not everywhere are we ready to receive it. Paraphrasing Martin Buber, he continues, when we open our eye to another's thou, that is where God lives. God lives in the between that joins self to self through an act of covenantal kindness. That is chesed, the physical deed in which soul touches soul and the universe acquires a personal face. End quote. I want to bring up Rabbi Sacks' articulation of the holy in human compassion by way of saying that loving kindness is one of the things to which we dedicate ourselves in spiritual community. When the Jews returned to the ruined temple in 165 BCE, the cherubs face to face would have been waiting for them in the holiest of holies. Whatever had gone on in the hard years of exile from the temple, lighting the fire of rededication was a chance to claim space for people in relationship. They were moved to begin again, to start over with worship and learning, even as the struggle continued outside. Hanukkah recreates an experience of drawing people together. It is a reenactment of starting over in hope. Holding hope is a struggle right now. We worry about what the coming year will bring for our beloveds who are immigrants, who are trans, who are seeking reproductive care, who dedicate their lives to speaking truth to power. We worry about the deadly profit-seeking of health insurance companies, about violence, and about the Earth's changing climate. We worry about war and famine in places like Sudan, Haiti, and Ukraine. And as we tell the stories of this season, our hearts break for the people of the Middle East. Yet to me, hope is not a wish or an optimistic assurance of an outcome. To me, hope is doing the next right thing that helps us to create the world we want to see, the world we can manifest in small ways as we move toward that goal. Hope is not about waiting passively. It is about picking up the pieces that are ours to pick up. The synagogue my family belongs to gave me some hope last week. The synagogue hosted the co-directors of Standing Together, a progressive grassroots movement mobilizing Jewish and Palestinian citizens of Israel against the occupation and for peace, equality, and social justice. Standing Together says, where there is struggle, there is hope. The speakers, Alon Lee Green and Rula Daoud, are respectively a Jewish Israeli citizen and a Palestinian citizen of Israel. They were unapologetic in discussing their work toward a peaceful and just resolution to the seemingly intractable reality that engulfs Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. They called for a ceasefire and a return of the hostages, to which the audience applauded. They acknowledged everything that has happened in the last 14 months, the horrors of October 7th, and the horrors of bombing civilians in Gaza and impeding aid from reaching them, and the violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. And yet, as relatively young people who have experienced fear and dehumanization and violence and a corrupt right-wing government their entire lives, they find hope in the work of organizing. Rula Daoud said that when they gather people together and ask what they want, everyone wants something similar: safety, dignity, good schools for their children, enough to eat. She said that what people have in common is far greater than what sets them apart, and that only a tiny minority benefits from the polarization and the continued cycle of violence. Standing Together has organized not only public witness, but de-escalation dialogues, campaigns to raise humanitarian aid, a humanitarian guard campaign to help ensure the aid reaches its destination, and support for victims of discrimination. And their message is resonating. Their student groups have grown dramatically, and they are active on 14 campuses in Israel and Palestine. Their worldwide membership is increasing. Standing Together has organized the biggest demonstrations in Israel that are calling for a ceasefire agreement and a hostage deal since October 7th, drawing tens of thousands to the streets across the country. Standing Together says that another way is possible. As their grassroots movement brings more people together, one conversation at a time, one relationship at a time, the future that they are creating gains power. Despair may be tempting in this moment, and yet even now, people are moving forward in hope. This is the season for continuing onward in love, even when we don't know for sure what will happen next. This is the season for imagining what could be possible in the realm of justice. This is the season when the dance of light and darkness sparks dreams of transformation. Darkness and light are both divine. Changes in darkness and light can remind us that change is possible in all things. On the Jewish calendar, the months follow the phases of the moon. The 8 days between the 25th of Kislev and the 2nd of Tevet always fall around the new moon, the darkest nights of the month, near the winter solstice, the darkest time of the year. It is a time of mystery and reflection. We light candles as we observe the deepest darkness and rededicate ourselves to the flame of freedom. When we reach the end of Hanukkah, the moon will be waxing again. Our pagan friends might say the waxing moon is a good time to invoke new projects. Yet we're in the middle of a lot of things. So today might not seem like a day of fresh starts and new possibilities. This is not a chapter 1 or a final chapter. This is the middle of the story. In the middle of the war between the Maccabees and the Seleucid Greeks, the Jews stopped what they were doing to give thanks and to celebrate. Their victory for that war was still several years away. The extremely energy-efficient oil that fueled the menorah for over a week is a pretty neat miracle. But I don't want to overlook the miracle of people who rededicated their sacred space and their lives, despite the odds. This is the kind of miracle we need now. With all of the fear and worry on our minds, it may seem easier to burrow into lives of individual concern, forgetting for the moment that we are all connected. One might be tempted to give up on the sacred places and the life of the spirit. Why not just join the side with all the swords and the war elephants? Hope takes some effort. It is time for us to kindle the flame. We do not light a beacon by ourselves. There are movements of people working toward justice, peace, and health. There are organizing meetings and fundraisers and candlelight vigils where people can build coalitions. There are ongoing efforts for coordinated compassion, places that help neighbors to feed and clothe and house and empower themselves. There are group chats on Signal and Blue Sky hashtags and knitting projects and pen pal programs that connect people around the planet, each tending flames of hope. This, I believe, is part of what a spiritual community is for. In a congregation, we come together to lend the strength and courage we need to bear witness to justice, equity, and compassion. We create sacred space where our individual hurts can be soothed and where we can prepare together for healing the world. Gathering up the energy to rededicate ourselves and our spiritual home to the practice of our values is an act of generosity that benefits people all around us. There's a tradition to suggest that the menorah lit in the evening should be visible from outside the house. This way it becomes a public witness, a reminder to all that unlikely victories can happen, an expression of gratitude for whatever degree of freedom we enjoy, and an urging to keep going. Kindling a flame helps us to become more visible, to find each other. These flickers become a signal beam, bringing hope to those who thought that their small flame was the only one. Together we will sustain the beacon for much longer than anyone had imagined. So be it. Blessed be. Amen.